We've been having trouble logging into Forrest Gump's Humanity account. What's the password again, Patrick?
One, Forrest, one.
Hey everyone, happy Friday. How about that joke? I will jump in right to our update by sharing a great, exciting announcement. We've taken the first step towards construction, or the next step towards construction, by arranging for the house on the gravel lot that remains to be moved. So this should probably be happening in the next 2 to 3 weeks. We'll let you know of a precise date. But until then, we needed a meeting space and an extra storage space. So we rented an apartment just across the street from the gravel lots entry. It's the tan building of apartments there. And we are in Unit C, like LVCC, and we'll use that for extra storage space, meeting space, and of course so that our overnight doctors, when they need to take a rest on those extra long weekend shifts, they have a place to go and do that. So again, we're Unit C, and we keep the key with our general key storage area in the food prep area, and they're labeled for that. So again, we have access to that now, and we'll start using it immediately for meetings at least. The next thing that was exciting that happened this week was our resort team underwent some training on a new process that they are putting in place. It's kind of a zoning type of process, which will allow them to have fewer people who are caring for more exact pets. So pets who board in a specific zone of the resort will have just a single caregiver per shift, or some shared responsibilities when we have multiple pets in the hospital. But the idea is to have a precise, responsible caregiver for each group of pets who are at the resort, so that they can become and stay more intimately involved in that pet's care. So we're just getting started. We'll see how it goes as we go into this next season of boarding, and just correct it over the way. But I'm really proud of the resort team for taking the time to press pause on their process and develop something new. So that's always exciting, and great job to them. Okay, going into the rest of our announcements that I have in writing. I know Humanity's been giving you guys some problems. Maybe you're watching this through Slack. I will say this week, instead of posting the text of what we review in the update in the Humanity file alone, I did post it there. I also attached it as a PDF. All of our attachments are PDFs, so they should be friendly for you to open for any device that you use, and to make sure that you read them all as well. So hopefully this will just be a little something that can help us along while Humanity's fixing those glitches that they have. One of the things that we added this week was we have gone and added the syringe pump code to multiple estimates as a variance for use. And I just mostly wanted to remind the team that that syringe pump code is a charge. So if you're using the syringe pump, you should be charging for it. It's not very much, it's about $3, but that's a piece of equipment that we have to collect to use. We need to pay for the equipment, and then we also need to pay for it enough to where if it breaks that we can replace it. So it's important to remember those things. If you're using something extraordinary, there's a charge for it. Fluid pumps have a charge for them. Anesthetic monitoring has a charge for it, because it's equipment that we have to maintain. So just don't forget that charge. Again, we've tried to help by adding it to some of the estimates, but you just have to remember to enter it for extra uses that you have as well. Another reminder that we have is regarding the yesterday's news. That's the compacted newspaper pellets that we use after a cat's been declawed. So we have the cost of that bag associated with the treatment plan. It might not show up in the history until you print the invoice for the client, but anytime that we do a declaw, we allot for that cat to get a bag of the yesterday's news. So the idea is that you use it in the hospital, and then when you send them home, you send them home with the majority of the rest of the bag to use. So one of two things is happening. Either we're forgetting to send them home, or we are using so much of it in the hospital that there isn't any left to send home. So I would say this: you really only need a small handful per litter pan that you're going to use. The idea is not to make a deep, thick layer of it. You just need enough to where the cat feels like they're kind of digging around, moving something around that they could bury their excrement, and that's all that they need. When they're in the hospital, we're changing those litter pans so frequently anyways that you really don't need more than a small handful. I'm talking about 10 or 12 pellets in your hand. You put them down. That should make that bag last long enough for the owner to have a good bit to take home, and then you give them the same instructions. As far as it being forgotten, I will call this. We print on the discharge instructions for those declaws that the client should expect to receive a bag from us. So if you're reviewing those, it should work as a reminder for you to send that bag home as well. You have to make sure that you're always reviewing a discharge form and not just going by memory, because we do customize those. So that should be something that should help you. And then also we usually put a label of the patient's name on the bag so that you would know to send it home with them and keep it nearby their hospital space. Okay. The next thing that we wanted to go over is a simple adjustment, but something that I think will be impactful, is we're going to actually ask the doctors this week to start adding notes to patient death related diagnosis codes so that the customer care team can reference those when they are communicating with a client over the death of a patient. Maybe that client calls back with questions, or maybe we just need to have all the details around us to be the most sensitive and understanding and accommodating that we can to that client. So how this might look would be that we would have a diagnosis in that created the code of death in AVIMARK for record keeping purposes, and then we would add notes to the cause for that. Or we would have a final diagnosis like end-stage renal failure would be the diagnosis, and then we would put notes under it pertaining to that pet's death. Maybe it was, humane euthanasia, or, whatever it was. So I think the customer care team, if you could get familiar with looking at the diagnosis tab, some of your questions that you have regarding the outcome of a case or the details of a situation that you're facing, you might find what you're looking for in that area too. The next thing that I wanted to add was we've had a couple of team members who have been asking us for a code for CPR, and I wanted to just give some clarification here because we do have our bases covered in this area. We have 2 treatment plans in AVIMARK for emergency stabilization. One is for the basic stabilization, and then another is for advanced, where maybe the care would be continued on for the first 24 hours. So within these, although there's not a particular line item that says CPR or a code in AVIMARK that's just CPR, there are a couple of things that would cover the concept of CPR if that's what you're looking for. So I've attached both of those treatment plans as PDFs today to this training. And then I would say also, if you look at them, we have an office visit exam, we have oxygen therapy for an hour, we have multiple injections, IV catheter placement, fluid pumps, all of those things. And then in the advanced care, we have 24 hours worth of 3 8-hour blocks of hospitalization as well. It's enough to get you started, and we felt like between the office visit and the oxygen therapy charges, that if we did need to do CPR for that patient, that the costs associated with our time for doing that would be covered. I would recommend that you use these plans as they are, and you can just post the plan, just adjust your injections as you see fit, as you needed to. But they are pretty inclusive as they are for what you would need to do to stabilize a pet. CPR would rarely be effective in reviving a pet just done by itself without any injections. So you wouldn't ever need to just charge for the office visit and the oxygen therapy if that were the case. So those treatment plans are created to be pretty all-inclusive. The only thing that you would change would be the particular injections, the amount of them, that kind of thing. But the treatment plan is a good base for you. I love to work from a treatment plan instead of just posting individual charges or trying to work from memory. I like to assign the treatment plan to the patient and then post it, get it all in medical history, and then I can change my totals of what actually happened and attach my inventory. It's just a great base. It's a clean way to work, and it prevents you from forgetting any of those important things that go into what's often a really hectic and chaotic situation. All right, so moving on to the next thing. This Sunday at 1 a.m., we are updating our Avomark to the newest version, which promises a lot of speed enhancements. And I say that kind of with bated breath because we're doing pretty good right now, but it also offers some new features that we're pretty excited to take advantage of for client record keeping and reminding and so forth. But anytime that we do an update, we are going to have an outage of Avomark for a time, which is why we do it overnight. So for this update, it's a big update. We're expecting it to take 3 to 4 hours. So we're starting at 1 a.m. and just compensating that that's a time of day where we often see emergencies, or we will have new clients who find us and they bring in for these intense situations. We have created a little guidebook for the team who's working overnight. We're going to keep this folder beside the treatment 2 computer where we charge the cell phone in the treatment room, and this has a few of our most relevant estimates for that time of day, some new client forms, some blank anesthesia monitoring forms, some medical consent forms, as well as some sheets where you can keep notes for re-entering them into the medical condition once Avomark is restored. How this usually works is our IT guy, Alan, he will remote in and he'll advise everybody that it's time to close out Avomark, and then he'll get started on the process. Once he's finished, he will send another side note saying that you can resume using it. So what I'm asking is when we close on, well, not close, but when the final team leaves on Saturday night, the 5 to 11 bulk of the team, the customer care team as well, leave at that time, then we will close out Avomark everywhere except for the essential treatment room computers, which you can keep working through until Alan reaches out to us at 1 a.m. to get started. That way you only have to close those things. So if you work in an office, if you work in the call center when you're leaving on Saturday, make sure that you close Avomark completely. That way we don't have to run around and try and do those things. It will throw glitches that would really destroy our system. So it's imperative that you close Avomark everywhere. If you work in an external office, like the administration spaces, we're going to close our Avomark when we leave today, Friday, and make sure that they remain closed. So just make sure that you do those things. I'm going to post this message in Slack too. That way it'll be really easy to remember. And I have some details for the treatment room team that's working overnight on Saturday too. All right, so the next thing that I want to go through is when we're refilling medications in Avomark, we have to make sure that we look to the most current, as in like the last refilled label, to fill from that. And then there's a couple steps as well that we do. Also, I want you to look for any CCOs from the last month in that patient's record that may, and this is just a glance, you'll know quickly from looking at it if there were drug dose changes contained in those, where maybe verbal instructions had been given to an owner for permanent instructions that need to be changed on the label. And the other really beneficial thing to do is to go ahead and ask the client if they're still giving at the current dose that we have listed on the label. If they say yes, you choose to refill. If they say no, when you choose to refill, you have to change the drug label. This is so important. It's important to make sure that that pet, no matter where they go or who gives the medication, will be able to work from that label. And also you have to remember that a label represents a medical note. It's direct instructions from the doctor. So if we give a drug label that has the wrong instructions on it, we have set that pet and that client up for failure. You have to make sure that they're correct. We've had so many cases recently where we've just chosen to refill a drug and it was inaccurate information. And I really feel for that patient who got under or overdosed on their medication because we inaccurately kept the label. Ultimately, it's the responsibility of the person who enters the label, clicks refill. If it shows up under your initials, you're responsible for that. And you'll have to be held accountable for that with the owner and with our practice. It is that important. So again, my process is I go find the last label. I look for any CCOs. I also, if I have the luxury of speaking with the client, I go ahead and I say, are you still giving it this dose? And if they say no, Dr. Whoever suggested that I change it to this, and that's what I've been doing and it's working really well, I say, great, I'm going to update your drug label right now. And I do that before I print it. That way we know the accurate information is there. Also, you know, if the dose is increased, that obviously the quantity is going to have to increase or decrease if it's decreased, so that you can adjust the amount that they need to take. You definitely don't want to be giving them the wrong amount that's not going to last them for the period of time that they expected it to. And most of the time when we dispense a medication, we're dispensing 30 days worth. So you have to have all these details about you before you click refill, because there's so many follow-up processes. The last thing I'll say, just to make this ultra important and raise your awareness as high as possible, is, again, you want to make sure that we're setting this patient up for success and this client, because so many people have alternate caregivers for their pets, whether it's here at our resort or another boarding facility. If they have a pet sitter, a family member, however, that label needs to be accurate. And some of the mistakes that we've had from the pet resort were because our labels were inaccurate, and we want to make sure that we serve everybody the best. So you have to fix the label. I can't be more clear about that. All right, so moving on to the next thing. It is really important to make sure that we choose the correct doctor as a provider in Avamark all the time. And I mentioned this 2 weeks ago in an update, but it's still not accurate as frequently as we need it to, which is all the time. So I will say, you need to, when you choose the right item in Avamark, treatment, over-the-counter item, inventory item, medication, whatever it is, you have to make sure that you're choosing the provider who's caring for the pet at that time. An example of this is in the treatment room when we are putting pets' treatments on whiteboard. Even for something as simple as a walk for a patient, where there's maybe not a fee associated, that still has to be under the name of the doctor who's caring for that patient at that time. We reference that information, and having it incorrectly has caused confusion, because we assume that if it's Dr. Sanders' case, that those things are going to be under Dr. Sanders and not under another doctor. If we see him under another doctor, we might follow a false lead and follow that doctor for information, and we would hit a dead end. So for record keeping purposes, for continuity of care, all of it, you have to make sure that you enter things consistently under the doctor who is providing the care to that patient. When we're not doing that in the exam room, I feel like that's just a general oversight that we actually have to correct. If a doctor is in the exam room, there is no question that those things should fall underneath their name for documenting what happens, for charging a client for those items. Everything needs to go under the provider name. Nurses, you just have to do a better job of it and make sure that it hits your radar of importance. All right, so the next areas that we want to go over are some vaccines that we've had changes to this week. The first is our feline leukemia protocol. We're talking about this on an annual basis. So kittens get 2 feline leukemia vaccines, and then what's happened is we've in the past been kind of leaving this up to the lifestyle of the pet. However, we know that in our state alone that cats have a heightened risk for encountering other cats, and so makes this disease really, really prevalent and important to vaccinate against. So we've written this all out in the text so that you can read it, but considering that even indoor cats are exposed, we are going to resume evaluating a cat situation appropriately, but vaccinating for leukemia more frequently. So we've added it back into the annual as a vaccine, and you'll see it as a comboed vaccine. Just delete it if it's not appropriate for your situation, but it is in the annual as an example, and we can show you that at any time. Okay, the next one is the lepto. We now, first of all, The best description of this, because I'm going to go really quick for the sake of time, was in the Slack video that Dr. Kristen posted. But we now have 3 vaccines to choose from in the GCHME code. One is with lepto, one is a distemper without lepto, and one is an only lepto vaccine. So you would usually choose the DHLP, which is the with lepto, and then just delete the other ones if you didn't. But if your situation was the opposite, you're basically going to delete the vaccines that you don't need. We're working on our titers because that was something that influenced a lot of these other situations, considering that we have more clients wanting to titer for vaccines versus vaccinate. So we're working on finding some better pricing to make a better package. And until then, we're going to go with what we have now, which is the same titering codes that we send out. And we're going to ask that you, being our customer care team, when a client calls to schedule those types of appointments, maybe they would want to come in for their annual and have their titering done at the same time. We're going to encourage them to come first for their titering and have a blood draw with a nurse, and then they can return in 2 weeks to actually have their annual with a doctor. If we do it that way, we'll have the results available for the titering, and we would know how we need to respond with alternate vaccines or not, and how we need to charge for those things for clients. So again, I've got all the details written in the text if you're confused, and we'll make sure that your assistant managers qualify this with you. But what I'm asking you to do is, when we're scheduling a client who usually does not vaccinate, or who maybe by phone mentions that they're interested in titering versus vaccinating, but they want to come in for their annual, we would recommend that they come in and have a nurse's visit 2 weeks prior to when they want to have their annual, and then you can make a second appointment for them to return, in which case the doctor will have the titer results in hand and can review them. Okay, so the last announcement that I have is that we have a new radiograph code. It's called RADD, and it's $40 for a view. And we would use this code for if we've already done a radiographic study and we want to repeat within a 24-hour time while they're in the hospital. So sometimes we have a pet who presents and we're suspecting a foreign body, and a barium study maybe wasn't the most appropriate thing, or maybe it was and we wanted to take another view the next day in 12 hours and 16 hours, whenever it is. It could maybe be a heart patient who we've given a dose of Lasix to, and we want to take a chest rad 24 hours later. This is just so you don't have to charge that bulk fee of maybe like $120 to $160 for the next radiographic study, and you just are going to take one view as a little follow-up type deal to check for movement or progress or whatever. It's a $40 fee, and the code is RADD. All right, so if you have any questions over those things, it's important that you make sure that you reach out to the assistant manager that you have assigned to you now, those point people in your department, so that you can get all the accurate information that you need to make good decisions, because these things are effective immediately. All right, and then we have some closing remarks from some of our doctors. Thanks, and have a great weekend.
Dr. Patrick, what's the best time to pull teeth?
2:30